Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast with Yoke Van Dam. Trying to pronounce that right. Lots of words to pronounce right today. She's the Kinzuki Queen, and she's founder at Y Connect as well. So we're going to talk about coaching, emotional intelligence, team motivations, training, everything in between. Excited to have Yoke on the pod today. This pod is brought to you by podpar.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one, find sponsors, find guests, you can go to podpar.com for that. Podpar.com is my agency for podcasting, and a bunch of people use podcasting to learn. They use it to grow their network, and they use it to grow leads and clients. Podpar.com. Yoke, can you tell us a little hello and introduce yourself?
Hey Charles, it's so nice to see you. I'm calling in all the way from South Africa. It's lovely weather this side. So, what I'm really passionate about and what I've actually been doing this week is I do a lot of leadership development and teamwork. I work with teams that I call them fractured, teams that have gone through the different phases of a team and they've actually realized that they're not meshing as well as they should. But this week was actually interesting. I had some CEOs that I was coaching on their presentation styles and keynotes. Then I had some leaders from Nigeria who came in for a trip to South Africa that wanted leadership development. And then I had some career coaching that I did. And today I did some leadership coaching again, dealing with how to do performance management and just the regular staff issues that leaders sit with and what is the best approach. So like as you can see, like a week can be very different for me. I was driving from Joburg to Pretoria, getting people from overseas. I drove to Pretoria again for a CEO coaching session, and then a lot of it was online. 2 weeks ago was in Dubai. So things move around, I think the world has become so small. Like you're in Mexico, I'm in South Africa. The world has become so small and we can all learn from each other. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And what challenges do you see in humans in these organizations, mindset wise, most of the time?
A lot of people struggle to trust each other. And what was interesting, I was actually very, very impressed with the two leaders on Tuesday because they trust their teams, but they're very open to also hear people's opinions. So very often you would find that leaders have a opinion of my way or the highway. I win, you lose, shut up. And then what happens with the team is they don't trust the leader. So they'll rather keep quiet. They don't trust each other. So it actually creates a lot of toxic behaviors. You often see that in marriages and as well, in families. A lot of people have had bad experiences in the past, and they tend to just, based on past behavior, I can't trust anyone, So that I would say is one of the things that I've picked up. But also, a lot of people tend to just be negative. And I don't know if you've noticed that on social media, people can get into a very negative spin. They'll complain and they'll spiral. So something interesting that happened in South Africa is competing in the Rugby World Cup at the moment. And the other day there was a match against Ireland, and both teams played exceptionally well. But one of the players is very young. I think he's like 20, 26 years old. And a lot of pressure was put on him that he had to be the kicker, but he's not traditionally one of the best kickers. He's actually good in other roles. But the person that used to have that role was benched because he had an injury, so he's still recovering. And then so many people went into the toxic negativity of like, oh, this guy didn't perform well enough, and I actually saw a mother posting something on Facebook saying, this is someone's son. Don't be so negative and toxic. Like, everyone is not always going to perform at their peak, and no one else is going to come and down on you, rain all hell down on you when you make a mistake. Why should people do it in the sport context? So I just think there's a lot of negativity, and people like to almost like bring people down where they're keyboard warriors, where they can just hide behind a screen and they don't realize there's actually a human being there that still needs to perform. And how are they going to now come back when they've been named and shamed on social media?
I mean, social media, yeah, quite negative. I think these players, they grow thick skin. I think it's part of the sport. Some of them don't read the comments, but I think most of them, they just develop a shield through sheer exposure. They get exposed to these comments, these negative vibes, especially on Twitter nowadays. Well, I mean, all social media are pretty negative. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's a reflection of human nature. Just, yeah, the break of scale. Like when you're a billion humans on one social media, like, and you've got a couple of bad apple, it pollutes the full batch. Anyway, so I think exposure helps these humans most of the time. That is, if they've got the right back end, the right framework and set of mind. If they work on themselves, on how to think and understand that haters are human, that sometimes themselves there are some haters, that um if they can show empathy also to those people that are going through tough things. We often don't realize that as humans, but biochemically we have very different realities. It's a bit more than mindset. I've been biohacking myself for the past decade now, and I just feel good. Even if there's stress in my life, I have caffeine in my veins and a bunch of other cool supplements, and I just feel good. But most people, they don't have that. It's like the state when you wake up in the morning sometimes and you're tired. Well, their life is perpetual. Is this in perpetuity? Perpetuity. That's a complex word. And basically, they're constantly suffering. So it's like, if they don't feel good, what are they gonna do on social media? They're just gonna spit their venom, their toxic venom in there.
What what they've proven is that 70 to 90% of people's thoughts tend to be negative. So if you don't actually do something with your thoughts and change them, reframe them, catch yourself, and actively work towards gratitude and positive psychology, you will just be stuck, like you say, in that negative venom. So a lot of people have never conditioned their own thoughts to be like, let me focus on positive things. So the fact that you are biohacking in terms of what you're taking in, that's already so proactive, realizing this is what I need to be healthy, to have the state of mind to work. That's much further ahead than most people are.
And in org, do you see that same toxicity as well?
In what?
In organizations, in 9 to 5s, because I'm not a firm believer in the 9 to 5 model. People being paid hourly or salary, they're just there to warm chairs and sound productive, but in the end, what they really care about is being paid and having food on the table. So these folks, they're not incentivized, most of them, at least in most organizations, to perform highly. So what kind of problems do you see in teams with these same mindsets that we often see on social media?
So, what they often do is they compare themselves to each other and they have a lot of infighting. So, in terms of they're all wanting to have the highest amount of status. So they're looking at, am I being treated in the same way by my boss? Are they getting a better bonus than me? Is there, yeah, I don't know, something that was discussed today is the one lady is a single mother with children, and the other people get upset if she leaves to go fetch her children. But what must she do? It's the reality. She can hire an au pair and all of that, but it's just like sometimes everything can't just be the same looking at the circumstances that you're in. So people are a little bit unrealistic, almost like little children saying, give me the same amount of sweets, but everything is not always the same. You also find in teams there's a lot of vagueness. So they don't commit to timelines, they don't buy into goals. So then what happens is they keep on having multiple meetings that doesn't lead to anything. So exactly what you're saying, they're at work for that amount of time, but they're not very productive. They don't really buy in. They don't hold each other accountable. So they're actually just very often wasting the company's time. So I also believe in what you say, like being outcome focused, having very clear outcomes, energy management, and not necessarily working the entire day. I don't think it's feasible to work the entire day. You need to manage your energy and work on different projects, and possibly you can get it done in a quicker time. Doesn't actually matter how much time it takes. It's about, are you achieving the objective? That's more what it's about. So I think a lot of people are very much still focused on that old way of, you have to work so many hours, you know? Yeah, that's a very traditional way of working, and it's hard to kind of move away from that. And what I also see on the other hand is a lot of teams are super overworked. So I was actually shocked to hear some people on positions where during COVID they combined a few positions, like two top leadership positions. This person's now working like that for the last 3 years. It's totally unrealistic. Like, no time for balance, personal relationships, time for husband and the kids or anything like that. And I've seen this in Dubai as well, where they say with the flexibility of you can work from home, it's now expected that you're available at all hours. So I think there's a lot of like work-life balance that has fallen away in many ways, where a lot of people they don't even have any personal goals anymore. It's just, they're kind of like just in survival. They're just surviving their job. They can't have their own personal life looking at, what's important to me physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationship wise. So they need to kind of like find the balance between all of those areas, and they're really struggling to even see that as a possibility,
My
which is
realization,
sad.
yeah, is that most humans don't have a growth mindset. And I mean, to you and I, it's probably second nature because I started having that mindset a decade ago and I've never looked back since. But some people are still at this starting stage, sort of. But yeah, it's not all bleak, right? Because there's you, the Kintsugi queen. What you do is that you come in orgs when they're broken, when teams are broken, and you add gold in the cracks like the Japanese art. Can you explain a bit more about what you do?
Yes, what I've seen with teams is ever since COVID, so many teams have not completely been broken. It's more like they've fractured because some people have left the department. Some people have completely moved countries. Some people go on leave. Some go on maternity leave. So what we used to have in a team is not the same anymore. So what I've found is ever since COVID, a lot of teams never even met in person because I just moved into the remote space. People then joined companies. They did all their onboarding, everything online. Sometimes they don't even have cameras. So they've never even seen the people. So they're purely communicating on a Teams call where they hear the voices. Like, how hectic is that? So what's been interesting is when they then have a session with me is it's not just about skills development. It's actually about creating a workspace culture, but then also for them to get to know each other. So it actually becomes a team building thing. So when I was in Dubai the other day, that was more leadership development work, but it was 4 days, different teams, people across departments, 2 days, 2 days. And what we found is a lot of people said to me, they know a lot of the names in the room, they've worked with them, but they've never spoken to them in person ever. They sit in the same building. So they've actually gotten to know people, and I'm sure the relationships are going to be so much better. So I think what often happens is People go in where the leaders say, these attitudes need to change, these skills are needed. People need emotional intelligence. We're getting issues around our reputation, or people are complaining, that our team is not performing as well. And we work on accountability. We work with the 5 dysfunctions of a team, but we also work around their communication style. So, how do some people tend to communicate, and how can they be better at communicating? So those are just some of the areas, but ultimately it's about getting people to bond and to get out of their own way. Because like you said, you've been doing this for a decade, so people tend to have a lot of like toxic behaviors. We all have it with our partners, with our friends, but it's about becoming aware that this is not a good thing and this will be damaging. So what I've noticed, Charles, is people start shifting when they notice, oh my goodness, I'm always stonewalling. That's where you run into your cave and then you don't tell people what's going on. Or I'm always criticizing. That's where you're attacking someone's behavior but not giving like corrective actions how they can actually improve. And when they realize, like, wow, this is going to be super demotivating to my husband, my team, to whoever, then they're like, oh my word, I must do something about it. So for me, I kind of work on a very deep level to let people understand and discover for themselves what could be damaging to their environment, and that's where they actually want to make changes. But also goal setting, like they I found people just don't set goals. They just in survival, they just on the freaking hamster wheel rat race, but they never look at, where do I want to be? What person do I want to be? What impact do I want to bring? And when we do those exercises and they kind of like forced you in that setting to now think about it, discuss it with each other, strategize, they're like, wow, that's so rewarding. So I just think sometimes you need to take the time out to go through a facilitated process that can actually get you further. And that's where the real gold lies, because on our own, we only get so far.
Right. Healing damages is hard because sometimes we don't control the heart and how it breaks apart, For example, me, I'm hard to insult, If someone tries to get under my skin, through sheer exposure, I've developed a shield. But a lot of people, sometimes for example, my parents, right? Sometimes I talk to them and, oh, I just insulted them, apparently. I don't know why it happened, or what traumas they have, but yeah, it happened. And I think if people rethink in terms of mindset, first exposure, right? Expose yourself to these comments, to hate also, and tolerate it. I think that is one. Two, an experimental mindset in terms of working and workers, right? It's not like, oh, we're giving up everything, this is over. It's
Mm,
like, oh, we're gonna try 100 things and see if 3 of these 100 things work.
mm,
I think that's how people should work. And finally, if you have your heart broken by someone that said something mean in the workplace and so forth, me, I'm at the level right now in which I mean, it's get your own mindset and visualization and pictures, because me, I played a game called um Super Mario Party, I believe it's called. And at some point you go see a guy, and then you have two options. You can either get the star or you get the mushroom. Both have a power, right? So these are like two decision cores. And once you take the mushroom or the star, it's over, right? You spend your money on it, and it's in you, and then you get a superpower. The point is, in that mind frame, is that I accept this decision, whether that means to keep on working with John, for example. Well, okay, I choose to keep on working with him. I don't look back at my decision. I don't second guess it, and I go all in with it. And guess what? If this doesn't work, and you should have a plan, right? I'm going to work with John for 2 weeks and see how that goes with that new mindset, for example. If that doesn't work after 2 weeks, and then you revisit your decision. Because I find people constantly self sabotage themselves with, analysis through paralysis, and they take a lot of energy
Yeah.
self-doubting things, and they never move
Mm.
forward. So once we agree to something, once we agree to a plan, it's pure execution, and there's no more, it's no more time to rethink. What do you think about that?
I think that's amazing. I think I think what you're saying about the self-sabotage is very true. We self-sabotage ourselves and overanalyze a lot. I want to go back to something you said earlier, Charles. You were commenting about sometimes you might say something to your parents and they could see it as an insult, and you don't know what their past traumas are. So I heard this saying in NLP that said the value of the communication lies not in your positive intent, it lies in the response it elicits. So that really challenged me because for many years, if I said something and someone saw it as an insult, I would say, that was not my intent and walk away. But when I realized that you should look at the response and then you need to keep on communicating until the people get what your true meaning is, and even apologize if you did insult, even if it was unknowingly, because perhaps there is something in there to learn, as you are engaging with people. So I had to get a point with, I think, the people that are closest to us in our families. So for me, with my husband, when we got married, we used to fight, and I had to get to this point to be like, we're not running out of the room, you know, you're not immediately going into flee mode or running inside your cave where you just keep quiet and don't say what's going on, or you don't immediately assume the worst and start shouting or being aggressive. You're curious and you say to the person, okay, that's quite hectic. I'm feeling quite hurt. Like being vulnerable, saying, is that what you meant? Or what did you mean? Like allow them to explain to you what they meant, and very often it's a misunderstanding, but you get to the point where both parties actually get to learn from each other. But what we tend to do in life is we tend to assume that others know what's happening in our brain and that they can mind read and that they are definitely wanting to insult us. And if you know that people probably have your best intention at heart, and possibly, like you say, they have their own traumas and whatever, but it's for you to also understand them. So to say, okay, it looks like that didn't go down well. Can you explain to me what happened there? So when you see your parents have the knee-jerk reaction, the whatever, they can actually maybe explain the filters that they sort through or what specifically, and maybe they would be able to explain that some of it's their own stuff and take accountability for that, but also explain what would be a better way of like being less hurtful, if that makes sense. But that takes a lot of vulnerability and a willingness to make any relationship work, and most people just don't care. They just walk away. So if you as a human want to learn through past conflicts or past triggers, that's one of the things that I've implemented. Like, don't run away from the room, stay curious, check your tone, don't be sarcastic, be neutral, and say to the person that felt very hurtful, or that that really wasn't cool. What did you mean? What did you really mean? And then they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. They'll probably start in that way, or try to explain to what they meant. But usually we miss each other. We miss each other all the time. Yeah.
It's so hard to be a human and interact with other humans when you think about it, because we all have different backgrounds, words mean
Yeah.
different stuff to us. And I mean, if you're in one culture, it diminishes the chance of insulting someone, but as soon as you have different backgrounds, then you drastically increase your chances of of like misreading or miscommunicating with someone. And yeah, that's it's a beautiful challenge there, and I'm quite optimistic on AI to help with that. Yoki, where can people find out more about you, or Yoke, I should say?
They can go to my website, which is y-connect.biz, or they can search for me on LinkedIn on Yoke Van Dam. But I'll make sure that I'll send you those links that you can maybe just pop at the bottom of the YouTube.
All right. Well, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
That was
much.
another founderwisdompodcast.com.